The stars had never looked so close until Captain Jake Morrison saw them through the viewport of the New Horizon. 3 years had passed since humanity first cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel, and now their small exploration ship drifted quietly in the darkness near Proxima Centauri. Jake ran his hand through his brown hair and checked the scanner readings one more time. Everything looked normal, just empty space and distant suns. Dr. Lisa Grant floated beside him in the zero-gravity section, her blonde hair tied back as she studied her diplomatic protocols on a tablet. She had spent months preparing for this moment, learning every first contact procedure that Earth's best minds could devise. The excitement in her green eyes was hard to miss. This was what she had trained her whole life for. The chance to meet another intelligent species and represent all of humanity. "Captain, we're getting some unusual readings on the long-range sensors," called out Engineer Paul Davis from his station. His voice carried a note of concern that made Jake turn around. Paul was usually calm about everything, so when he sounded worried, it meant something serious was happening. Jake pushed off from the viewport and floated over to Paul's station. The tall engineer pointed at his screen where dozens of red dots were appearing at the edge of their sensor range. More dots kept showing up every few seconds, growing larger as they moved closer to the New Horizon. "Ships," Paul said quietly. "A lot of them. They're coming fast, maybe 30 minutes out." Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked up from her xenobiology research station, her dark eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Are we sure they're ships? Could they be asteroids or some natural phenomenon?" Paul shook his head. "These are moving in formation. Perfect geometric patterns. No doubt about it, these are artificial vessels." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. This was it. The moment humanity had been preparing for since they first looked up at the stars. He pressed the intercom button that connected to all parts of the ship. "All crew, this is the captain. We have multiple unknown vessels approaching our position. This appears to be our first contact scenario. Everyone report to your stations and prepare for contact protocols." The next 20 minutes felt like hours as the crew watched the approaching fleet grow larger on their screens. Chief Engineer Ben Taylor had joined them on the bridge, his weathered face showing the calm that came from years of fixing problems under pressure. Communications Officer Nina Walsh sat at her station, ready to attempt contact with whatever was coming their way. When the alien fleet finally arrived, it took Jake's breath away. Hundreds of massive ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation around the New Horizon. Each vessel was at least 10 times larger than their small exploration ship, with dark metal hulls covered in weapon arrays that glowed with ominous red light. "My God," whispered Lisa. "There are so many of them." The alien ships formed a perfect sphere around the New Horizon, trapping the human vessel in the center. Jake could see thousands of weapon ports aimed directly at his ship. Whatever these aliens wanted, they had certainly brought enough firepower to get it. "Captain," Nina called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's being translated through our universal language protocols." "Put it on speakers," Jake ordered. A harsh, mechanical voice filled the bridge. The words were clearly translated, but the tone carried an unmistakable message of authority and contempt. "Human vessel, you are surrounded by the Imperial fleet of the Vecthari Empire. I am Admiral Kethvar, commander of this battle group. Your species has entered space claimed by the Empire. This is your only warning." Jake exchanged glances with Lisa. She nodded, indicating she was ready to attempt diplomatic contact. Jake pressed the communication button. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration vessel New Horizon. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship among the stars. We had no knowledge of your territorial claims." The alien admiral's response came back immediately, cutting off Jake's words. "Peace is irrelevant. Friendship is weakness. You will immediately provide the locations of all human colonies and worlds. Your species will submit to Imperial authority or face total destruction. You have 1 hour to comply." The communication channel went dead. Jake stared at the speaker, hardly believing what he had just heard. These aliens had no interest in negotiation or peaceful contact. They wanted complete surrender or they would destroy every human in space. "Well, that didn't go as planned," muttered Ben Taylor. Lisa was already working at her station, pulling up every piece of diplomatic theory she had studied. There has to be a way to negotiate with them. Every species has something they value besides conquest. "Look at those ships, Lisa," Paul said, pointing at the main screen. "Those are pure warships. Everything about their design says they're built for one purpose: destroying other vessels. Elena was studying the sensor readings of the alien fleet. Their technology is incredible. Energy signatures like nothing we've ever seen. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. Jake found himself thinking about something his grandfather had told him years ago. The old man had been a construction worker who helped build some of Earth's first space elevators. He always said that you could learn more about people by watching what they built than by listening to what they said. "Nina, can you get me another channel to the Admiral?" Jake asked. "Captain, are you sure that's wise?" Lisa asked. "We need to be very careful here. One wrong word could mean war for our entire species." Jake nodded. "I know the risks, but I have an idea." He turned to Nina. "Open the channel." "Admiral Kithvar, this is Captain Morrison again. Before you make any decisions about humanity, I'd like to make you an offer." The alien admiral's voice came back, sounding amused. "You are in no position to make offers, human. You are surrounded and outgunned by a factor of thousands." "I know," Jake said calmly. "That's exactly why I want to make this offer. You clearly have the power to destroy us anytime you want. But before you do, wouldn't you like to understand what you're destroying?" There was a long pause. Jake could almost hear the alien admiral thinking through the communication system. "Explain yourself, human. I invite you and a small delegation to come aboard our ship. Take a tour. See what humanity has accomplished. If you're going to conquer our species, shouldn't you know what you're conquering?" Another pause, even longer this time. When Admiral Kethvar spoke again, his voice carried a note of curiosity mixed with contempt. "You would invite your enemies aboard your vessel? This shows the weakness we expected from your species." "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe it shows something else entirely. What have you got to lose? You can destroy us just as easily after the tour as before." Lisa was staring at Jake like he had lost his mind. The rest of the crew looked equally shocked. Inviting hostile aliens aboard their ship went against every safety protocol ever written. But Jake had a feeling about these Vekthari. They were warriors, but they were also curious. Otherwise, why would they bother talking at all? "Very well, human," Admiral Kethvar finally said. "We will send a small shuttle. If this is some primitive attempt at treachery, your species will pay dearly." "Understood, Admiral. We'll prepare to receive your delegation." As Jake closed the communication channel, he turned to his crew. Their faces showed a mixture of fear, excitement, and complete bewilderment at what their captain had just done. "Jake," Lisa said quietly, "I hope you know what you're doing." Jake looked out at the massive alien fleet surrounding them. Hundreds of ships, each one capable of turning the New Horizon into space dust with a single shot. "So do I, Lisa," he said. "So do I." The Vekthari shuttle docked with the New Horizon 30 minutes later. Jake Morrison stood in the airlock with engineer Paul Davis and Dr. Elena Rodriguez, watching as the alien delegation prepared to board their ship. Through the reinforced window, they could see three figures in dark military armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The airlock cycled through its safety sequence, and Jake felt his mouth go dry as the inner door opened. The first Vekthari to step through was clearly Admiral Kethvar. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale gray skin and bright yellow eyes that seemed to analyze everything they looked at. His armor was covered in symbols that probably showed his rank and achievements in countless battles. Behind him came 2 other Vekthari officers, both nearly as tall and intimidating as their admiral. One carried a device that was probably scanning everything around them for threats or weaknesses. The other kept his hand near what was obviously a weapon, ready to draw it at the first sign of trouble. "Admiral Kethvar," Jake said, stepping forward with his hand extended in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome aboard the New Horizon." The alien admiral looked at Jake's outstretched hand for several seconds, clearly not understanding the gesture. Jake slowly lowered his hand and instead gave a small bow of respect. "Thank you for accepting our invitation," Jake continued. "I know this is unusual." "Indeed," Admiral Kethvar replied. His voice was deep and carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "In 300 years of conquest, no species has ever invited us to tour their vessels before surrender. This is either remarkable courage or remarkable stupidity." Paul Davis stepped forward with a slight smile. "Well, Admiral, maybe you can help us figure out which one it is. Would you like to see what makes this ship special?" The Vekthari admiral's yellow eyes fixed on Paul with interest. Your technology is primitive compared to Imperial standards. What could you possibly show us that we have not seen before? That's exactly what makes it interesting, Paul said, leading the group down the main corridor of the New Horizon. We had to solve problems differently because we didn't have your advanced technology to start with. As they walked through the ship, Paul began explaining the human approach to engineering. The corridors of the New Horizon were lined with what looked like ordinary metal panels. But Paul showed the Vectari how each panel was actually alive in its own way. This is self-healing hull material, Paul explained, taking out a small tool and making a tiny scratch on the wall. The aliens watched with growing interest as the scratch slowly filled itself in and disappeared completely. If the ship gets damaged, it fixes itself automatically. Admiral Kethvar leaned closer to examine the wall. Impressive. Our ships require extensive repair facilities for battle damage. How did you develop this technology? We studied how human skin heals from cuts and wounds, Paul said. Then we figured out how to make metal do the same thing. When you don't have the strongest weapons or the biggest ships, you have to be creative. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined them as they reached the main laboratory section. Her area was filled with plants, animals, and various biological samples from Earth and the few other worlds humans had visited. This is our life sciences section, Elena explained. Admiral, your species has conquered many worlds. How do you typically handle the existing life forms on those planets? The alien admiral seemed puzzled by the question. We eliminate anything that interferes with Imperial objectives. Useful species are preserved for labor or resources. Everything else is removed. Elena nodded thoughtfully. We tried a different approach. Would you like to see? She led them to a large display screen that showed images of Mars. The red planet now had patches of green covering large areas of its surface, and the images showed cities built into the landscape rather than on top of it. This is Mars, our neighboring planet, Elena explained. When we first went there, it was completely dead. No life at all. We could have simply built our cities and ignored the environment, but we chose to do something different. The screen showed time-lapse images of the terraforming process. Instead of destroying the existing Martian environment, the humans had worked with it. They introduced Earth plants that were modified to thrive in Martian soil, but these plants actually improved the soil as they grew. The plants we introduced don't just survive on Mars, Elena continued. They make Mars better. The soil becomes richer, the atmosphere slowly improves, and the whole planet becomes more alive. In 50 years, Mars will be more habitable than it was even before we arrived. One of the other Vectari officers spoke for the first time. This seems inefficient. You could have simply used atmospheric processors to change the planet to meet your needs. We could have, Elena agreed. But then we would have destroyed whatever potential Mars had that we didn't know about yet. This way we learn from the planet while we change it. We discovered 3 new mineral formations and 2 types of beneficial bacteria that we never would have found if we had just forced the planet to become like Earth, Admiral. Kethvar was studying the images carefully. Your species values discovery over efficiency? We value both, Paul said. But we've learned that if you take time to understand something before you change it, you usually end up with better results in the long run. They continued through the ship, and Paul showed them the adaptive AI systems that ran most of the New Horizons functions. Unlike the rigid programming that the Vectari used, human AI was designed to learn and improve itself constantly. Watch this, Paul said, bringing up a simulation on a computer screen. Computer, show us the most efficient route to the Centauri system. The AI immediately displayed a direct path between their current location and Centauri. Then Paul added, now show us the most efficient route if we want to gather scientific data along the way. The route changed completely, now including stops at several interesting star systems and asteroid fields. The AI had understood that efficiency meant different things depending on what the humans wanted to accomplish. Your artificial intelligence modifies its own objectives? Asked the Admiral. Not exactly, Paul explained. It understands that our objectives might change as we learn new things, so it builds flexibility into every plan. That way, when we discover something unexpected, we don't have to start over from the beginning. Dr. Elena Rodriguez showed them her research on human adaptation. She had been studying how human colonists on various worlds had modified not just their environments but themselves. Some colonists on high-gravity worlds had developed stronger bones and muscles over just a few generations. Others on worlds with different light spectrums had developed enhanced vision. Your species changes itself to match new environments? Asked one of the Vectari officers. This seems like weakness. Superior species force environments to match their needs. Maybe, Elena said with a smile. But our way means we can live anywhere. We become part of each world instead of just conquering it. And each world teaches us something new about what humans can become. Chief Engineer Ben Taylor joined them in the main engineering section. The heart of the New Horizon hummed with quiet energy. But what impressed the Vectari was not the power output but the elegance of the design. Everything in here can be rebuilt from basic materials, Ben explained. If we're stranded somewhere, we can literally rebuild the entire ship using whatever we find. We don't need specialized facilities or rare materials. You design for survival rather than maximum power, Admiral Keith Farr asked. We design for both, Ben said. But we've learned that survival usually matters more than raw power. The strongest ship in the galaxy is useless if it breaks down and can't be fixed. As the tour continued, Jake noticed something interesting happening. The Vectari delegation had started asking more questions, and their questions were becoming more thoughtful. They weren't just asking about technical specifications anymore. They were asking about why humans made the choices they made. When they reached the observation deck, Admiral Kethvar stood quietly for several minutes, looking out at his own massive fleet surrounding the small human ship. Finally, he turned to Jake. Captain Morrison, your ship is indeed primitive compared to Imperial technology. Yet you have shown us approaches to engineering and life that the Empire has never considered. Thank you, Admiral, Jake said. We know we have a lot to learn. That's why we came out here, to meet new species and discover new ways of doing things. Admiral Kethvar's yellow eyes studied Jake carefully. You admit weakness, yet you do not seem afraid. We're terrified, Jake said honestly. But fear and curiosity can exist at the same time. Right now, our curiosity is stronger than our fear. The alien admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He laughed. It was a harsh, mechanical sound, but it was definitely laughter. Captain Morrison, you and your species are either the most clever beings we have ever encountered, or the most foolish. We are not yet certain which. Well, Jake said with a smile, maybe you could help us figure that out too. Admiral Kethvar and his delegation returned to their shuttle after spending 3 hours touring the New Horizon. Jake Morrison watched through the observation deck as the alien vessel docked with the flagship of the Vectari fleet. He could only imagine what kind of discussion was happening aboard that massive warship. Dr. Lisa Grant floated beside him, still processing everything that had happened during the tour.
Jake, I think we might have actually impressed them.
Did you see how many questions they started asking toward the end? I noticed, Jake said. But I'm not sure if impressing them is enough. They still have us surrounded and they still want us to surrender our entire species. Commander Amy Foster had joined them on the bridge during the tour, and now she was studying the formation of Vectari ships surrounding them. Amy was one of Earth's best military strategists, sent on the New Horizon specifically to analyze any potential threats humanity might encounter. Captain, Amy said quietly, I've been thinking about something. These Vectari are clearly superior to us in terms of raw military power, but they're curious about our methods. What if we could use that curiosity? What do you mean? Jake asked. Amy pulled up a holographic display showing both the Vectari fleet and the New Horizon. They think in terms of conquest and domination. Everything they showed us today was about taking control through force. But what if we offered them a different kind of competition? Dr. Elena Rodriguez was listening from her nearby station. A competition? Amy, they have thousands of ships. We have one small exploration vessel. Exactly, Amy said with a growing smile. That's what makes it interesting. They know they can destroy us anytime they want, so why not propose a challenge that uses our strengths instead of our weaknesses? Communications Officer Nina Walsh looked up from her station. Captain, we're receiving another transmission from Admiral Kethvar. Put it through, Jake ordered. The alien admiral's harsh voice filled the bridge. Captain Morrison, your tour has been educational. However, it does not change the situation. Your species must still choose between surrender and destruction. Jake looked at Amy, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath and pressed the communication button. Admiral Kethvar, before we make that choice, I'd like to propose something different. A challenge. There was a long pause. When the Admiral spoke again, his voice carried a note of amusement. You wish to challenge the Imperial fleet to combat? Captain, Even your unusual creativity cannot overcome such odds. Not combat, Jake said quickly. A different kind of challenge. You've spent today seeing how humans approach problems differently than the Vectari Empire. What if we could prove that our approach is not just different, but better? Explain this challenge, Admiral Kethvar demanded. Amy had moved to Jake's side and was helping him with the details. Give both of our species the same resources and the same amount of time, Jake said. Let the Vectari use their traditional methods of conquest and control. Let humanity use our methods of building and cooperation. Then we compare the results. What kind of resources? The Admiral asked. Jake could hear interest in his voice now mixed with the skepticism. A star system, Amy said, taking over the explanation. Choose any uninhabited system you want. Give us both 1 year. The Vectari can conquer and develop it using Imperial methods. We'll build and develop it using human methods. After 1 year, we compare what we've accomplished. Chief Engineer Ben Taylor was listening from his station and immediately understood what Amy was proposing. Admiral, we're talking about a fair test. Same starting conditions, same time limit, same goals. The only difference is our methods. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined the conversation. Admiral, your empire has conquered hundreds of worlds using your techniques. You know they work. But have you ever tested those techniques against a completely different approach? Admiral Kethvar was quiet for several long minutes. Jake could almost hear him thinking through the implications of what they were proposing. What would be the terms of victory? The Admiral finally asked. Productivity, sustainability, and inhabitant satisfaction, Amy said immediately. She had clearly thought this through carefully. After 1 year, we measure which approach created more value in the long term. And the consequences of this challenge? Admiral Kethvar asked. Jake felt his heart beating faster as he answered. If the Vectari win, humanity surrenders all our worlds to the Empire. We accept Imperial rule completely. And if you win? The Admiral asked. Amy spoke before Jake could answer. If humanity wins, the Vectari Empire agrees to adopt human collaborative methods for expanding into new territories. No more forced conquest. You work with species instead of enslaving them. The communication channel went dead. Jake stared at the speaker, wondering if they had just made the biggest mistake in human history. They were literally betting the survival of their entire species on their ability to outbuild one of the galaxy's most successful military empires. Amy, Lisa said quietly, please tell me you have a plan for how we're actually going to win this challenge. I have some ideas, Amy said. But first we need to see if they even accept. Dr. Charlie Brooks had been working quietly at his science station throughout the conversation. Now he looked up with excitement in his eyes. If they accept this challenge, I know exactly which star system we should use. Kepler 442 has 3 planets and a rich asteroid belt, perfect for testing both approaches. Engineer Paul Davis was already running calculations on his computer. 3 planets would let us demonstrate different aspects of human building techniques. We could show terraforming, sustainable technology, and collaborative development all at the same time. Communications Officer Nina Walsh suddenly straightened at her station. Captain, Admiral Kethvar is requesting another channel. Put it through, Jake ordered. Captain Morrison, the Imperial Fleet Council has discussed your proposal, Admiral Kethvar announced. This challenge is unprecedented in Imperial history. However, we find the concept intriguing. Jake felt a wave of relief mixed with terror. They were actually considering it. We accept your challenge, Admiral Kethvar continued. The Kepler 442 system will serve as our testing ground. 1 year from today, we will compare results. The terms you stated are acceptable. Amy stepped forward. Admiral, to make this fair, both sides should start with exactly the same resources. No ships, no equipment, nothing but what we can carry in a single transport vessel. Agreed, Admiral Kethvar said immediately. The Empire is confident that superior Imperial methods will easily overcome any advantages your creativity might provide. There's one more condition, Jake said, looking at Amy for approval. During the year of development, neither side interferes with the other's work. This has to be a clean test. Of course, Admiral Kethvar replied. The Empire has no need to interfere with the efforts of a primitive species. Your failure will be evident enough without our intervention. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already pulling up star charts of the Kepler 442 system. Captain, this system has some interesting characteristics. The 3 planets are all different types. One is desert, one is oceanic, and one is heavily forested. It's almost like it was designed for this kind of test. Chief Engineer Ben Taylor was studying the sensor readings of the system. The asteroid belt has all the raw materials we could need. Metals, rare elements, even water ice. Both sides will have access to the same resources. Admiral Kethvar's voice came through the speakers again. Captain Morrison, you should know that the Empire has developed entire star systems in less than 6 months. Your species will be competing against 300 years of Imperial engineering experience. We understand, Admiral, Jake replied. And you should know that humanity has never backed down from a challenge, even when the odds seemed impossible. Then it is settled, Admiral Kethvar announced. Transport vessels from both sides will depart for Kepler 442 tomorrow. The challenge begins immediately upon arrival. As the communication channel closed, the bridge of the New Horizon became very quiet. Everyone was realizing what they had just committed to. The survival of humanity now depended on their ability to prove that building was better than conquering. Well, Amy said with a nervous laugh, I guess we better start planning. Commander Nina Walsh looked around at her crewmates. Are we really going to try to outdevelop a galactic empire? Jake looked out at the massive Vecthari fleet surrounding them, then back at his small crew. These people had just agreed to bet everything on the belief that human creativity and cooperation could overcome superior technology and military might. Yes, he said simply. We're really going to try. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already making lists of the equipment and personnel they would need. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We'll need engineers, biologists, social coordinators, and construction specialists. And we'll need to do something the Vecthari have probably never seen before, Amy added. We'll need to work together not just as humans, but with the environment and resources of each planet. Jake nodded. Then let's get started. We have 1 year to prove that humanity deserves to remain free. As the crew began making preparations for the biggest challenge in human history, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered if they had just saved their species or doomed it. Tomorrow would begin the 6 months had passed since the challenge began in the Kepler 442 system. Both the Vecthari Empire and humanity had arrived with single transport vessels and identical basic supplies. Now the differences in their approaches were becoming clear to everyone watching from orbit. Architect Ryan Peterson floated in the observation pod of the human transport ship, studying the 3 planets below. Each world had become a test case for human building methods, and the results were already impressive. Behind him, ecological engineer Tina Martinez was reviewing the latest reports from all 3 development sites. Ryan, take a look at these atmospheric readings from Planet 1, Tina said, bringing up a holographic display. The air quality has improved by 30% in just 6 months. Ryan turned from the viewport to examine the data. Planet 1 had started as a barren desert world with a thin, nearly unbreathable atmosphere. The Vecthari had immediately begun strip mining operations on the northern hemisphere, extracting valuable minerals with ruthless efficiency. Their industrial machines worked around the clock, carving deep pits into the planet's surface. The humans had taken a completely different approach. Instead of mining, they had established atmospheric processors that worked slowly and carefully. These machines didn't just create breathable air, they actually improved the existing atmosphere while they worked. The atmospheric processors are working better than we hoped, Tina explained. But the real success is what botanist Alex Johnson accomplished with the plant integration project. She changed the display to show the southern hemisphere of Planet 1, where the Vecthari side was covered in industrial scars and mining equipment. The human side was beginning to show patches of green. Alex had introduced specially modified earth plants that could survive in the harsh desert conditions. But these plants did more than just survive. Look at these soil composition changes, Tina continued. Alex's plants aren't just growing in the desert soil, they're actually making it richer. Each plant that grows makes it easier for more plants to grow. In another 6 months, we'll have created a sustainable ecosystem that generates resources instead of just consuming them. Ryan nodded as he studied the data. What about Planet 2? Tina switched the display to show the oceanic world. This planet was covered almost entirely in water, with only a few small islands scattered across its surface. The Vecthari had built massive floating platforms that processed the seawater to extract minerals and other useful materials. Their operation was impressively efficient, pulling resources from the ocean at an incredible rate. The human approach had again been completely different. Systems engineer Danny Clark and urban planner Katie Williams had built underwater cities that worked with the ocean environment instead of against it. Their structures were designed to enhance marine life while providing everything human colonists needed. Danny's underwater cities are incredible, Tina said. They generate more energy than they use by harnessing ocean currents and thermal vents. The cities actually improve water quality as they operate, and the marine life populations have increased by 40% since we arrived. How is that possible? Ryan asked. Katie designed the cities to function like artificial reefs, Tina explained. They provide shelter and breeding grounds for native sea creatures while housing our human colonists. The cities grow larger and more productive as the marine ecosystems around them become healthier. Ryan was amazed by what he was seeing. The human cities weren't just sustainable, they were actually making the planet more alive and productive than it had been before humans arrived. And Planet 3? He asked. Tina's smile grew even wider as she switched to the third display. Planet 3 had been covered in dense forests when both species arrived. The Vectari had immediately begun clearing large sections of forest to build their industrial facilities. Their approach was direct and efficient. Remove the obstacles, build what you need, extract maximum value in minimum time. The humans had done something that even Ryan found hard to believe. Instead of clearing the forest, they had built their settlements inside it. Social coordinator Greg Martinez and communications expert Laura Thompson had worked together to create research stations that were integrated into the living forest itself. Greg and Laura didn't just build in the forest, Tina explained. They convinced the forest to help them build. Their research stations are grown rather than constructed. Living trees form the support structures, and the buildings actually improve the health of the surrounding forest. The display showed research facilities that looked more like they had grown naturally than been built by humans. Buildings were woven between massive tree trunks, and the roofs were covered in living plants that provided both insulation and food for the researchers working inside. But here's the really impressive part, Tina continued. Laura developed communication protocols that let humans and Vectari researchers work together in the same facilities. The forest settlements are the only places in the system where both species are collaborating instead of competing. Ryan studied the images of mixed human and Vectari research teams working side by side. Some of the Vectari are actually participating in our projects? More than we expected, Tina said. Apparently, some of their scientists are fascinated by our approach to development. They're contributing their own expertise to help make our projects even more successful. As Ryan watched the progress reports from all 3 planets, he began to understand something important. The human approach wasn't just different from the Vectari method, it was fundamentally opposite. Where the Vectari took value from their environment, humans added value to their environment. Where the Vectari imposed their will on natural systems, humans worked with those systems to create something better than either species could achieve alone. Tina, what do the latest productivity reports look like? Ryan asked. She pulled up comparative charts showing resource generation from both the human and Vectari development sites. The Vectari are definitely winning in terms of raw materials extracted. Their strip mining operations have pulled incredible amounts of valuable minerals from all 3 planets. If we were measuring pure extraction efficiency, they would be far ahead of us, but Ryan could hear something else in her voice. But our sites are becoming more productive over time, while theirs are becoming less productive, Tina explained. The Vectari operations are consuming their environments. Eventually, they'll run out of easily accessible resources and have to move to new locations or dig deeper at greater cost. She changed the display to show projected productivity curves for both approaches. The Vectari curve started high but gradually declined as resources became harder to extract. The human curve started lower, but kept climbing steadily as their sustainable systems became more established and efficient. In 5 years, our sites will be producing more total value than theirs, Tina said. In 10 years, they won't even be close. Ryan felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. The human approach was clearly working, but would the Vectari accept the results when the challenge ended in 6 months? They were a military empire built on conquest and dominance. Would they honor their agreement if humanity actually won? Communications expert Laura Thompson's voice came through the intercom from Planet 3. Ryan, Tina, you need to see what just happened down here. What is it, Laura? Tina responded. We just had a delegation of senior Vectari officers visit our main research station. They spent 4 hours touring our facilities and asking detailed questions about our methods. They seemed particularly interested in our collaborative approaches. Ryan and Tina exchanged glances. This was unexpected. The terms of the challenge specifically prohibited interference between the two sides. But apparently they didn't prevent observation and learning. What kind of questions were they asking? Ryan asked. Technical questions about sustainable resource management, but also philosophical questions about cooperation and long-term planning, Laura replied. One of their engineers asked me why humans choose to build things that benefit other species as well as ourselves. What did you tell him? Tina asked. I told him that we've learned that helping others usually helps us too, even if we can't always see how at first, Laura said. He spent a long time thinking about that answer. Ryan looked out at the 3 planets of Kepler 442, each one showing the dramatic differences between conquest and collaboration. In 6 months, the challenge would end and both species would compare their results. The fate of humanity would depend on whether the Vekthari could see past their traditional measures of success to understand the deeper value of what humans had accomplished. Tina, Ryan said quietly, I think we might actually win this challenge. I hope you're right, she replied. But I'm more worried about what happens after we win. The Vekthari Empire has never had to change their methods before. Will they really be willing to abandon 300 years of successful conquest? Ryan didn't have an answer for that question. All he could do was continue building, continue proving that cooperation was more powerful than domination, and hope that the Vekthari were wise enough to see the truth when the challenge ended. Below them, the 3 worlds of Kepler 442 continued their transformation. On one planet, deserts were becoming gardens. On another OC, the year was over. Admiral Keithvar stood in the main observation deck of his flagship, looking down at the 3 worlds of Kepler 442. Beside him, Captain Jake Morrison waited quietly as teams of neutral observers from both species completed their final measurements and evaluations. The results were unlike anything the Vekthari Empire had ever seen before. Admiral Keithvar had expected an easy victory, a clear demonstration of imperial superiority over human primitiveness. Instead, he found himself staring at data that challenged everything he thought he knew about development and conquest. Admiral, said his chief analyst, Commander Vashkar, the final productivity reports are complete. The raw material extraction data shows Imperial operations extracted 47% more mineral resources than human operations during the challenge period. Admiral Keithvar nodded. This was what he had expected. Imperial strip mining techniques were the most efficient in the known galaxy. However, Commander Vashkar continued, his voice carrying a note of confusion, the sustainability projections show a different pattern. Imperial operations have depleted easily accessible resources on all 3 planets. Continued extraction will require increasingly expensive deep mining techniques. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward. Admiral, would you like to hear the human sustainability report? Admiral Keithvar gestured for him to continue, though he expected nothing that would change the obvious Imperial victory. Captain Tony Martinez had joined them on the observation deck, representing the human development teams. Our sites are producing 20% more total value than they were at the beginning of the challenge, and production rates are still increasing. The atmospheric processors on Planet 1 have created a self-sustaining ecosystem that will continue improving air quality and soil fertility for decades. Dr. Michelle Torres, the human team's ecological specialist, activated a holographic display showing all 3 planets. The oceanic cities on Planet 2 are now generating 60% more energy than they consume, and marine life populations have doubled. The forest settlements on Planet 3 have discovered 17 new species of plants with potential medical applications. Admiral Keithvar studied the data carefully. The human achievements were impressive, but they still didn't match Imperial extraction efficiency. Captain Martinez, your accomplishments are notable for a primitive species, but the Empire extracted more actual resources. By any reasonable measure, Imperial methods proved superior. Respectfully, Admiral, said Engineer Rick Nelson, who had been working on Planet 1, I think we need to look at the bigger picture. Rick activated another display showing long-term projections. Admiral, your operations extracted more resources in 1 year, but our operations will produce more resources over the next 10 years. And 20 years from now, Your sites will be exhausted while ours will still be getting more productive. Commander Vashker was studying the human projections with growing interest. These calculations assume continuous improvement in human systems. Imperial experience suggests that all operations reach peak efficiency and then decline. That's where our approaches differ, explained Dr. Michelle Torres. Imperial operations extract value from their environment. Human operations add value to their environment. The difference becomes more important over longer time periods. Admiral Kethvar was about to dismiss this argument when his communications officer interrupted. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from the Imperial High Command on Vecthar Prime. Put it through, Admiral Kethvar ordered. The holographic image of Supreme Commander Thak Ven appeared on the bridge. His presence commanded immediate attention from every Vecthari in the room. Admiral Kethvar, the High Command has been monitoring your unusual challenge with great interest. What are your findings? Admiral Kethvar straightened to full military attention. Supreme Commander, Imperial forces extracted 47% more resources than the humans during the challenge period. Imperial methods proved their superiority. Supreme Commander Thak Ven's expression remained neutral. And the human methods? What did you learn about their approaches? Admiral Kethvar hesitated. He had not expected this question from the High Command. Their methods are unusual, Supreme Commander. They focus on long-term sustainability rather than maximum extraction efficiency. Elaborate. Supreme Commander Thak Ven commanded. The humans build systems that become more productive over time rather than less productive, Admiral Kethvar explained. Their development projects actually improve the environments they work in. Supreme Commander Thak Ven was quiet for several long moments. When he spoke again, his words surprised everyone listening. Admiral, the High Command has been reviewing reports from Imperial worlds throughout the galaxy. We are encountering increasing costs for resource extraction and growing resistance from conquered populations. Perhaps it is time the Empire considered new approaches. Admiral Kethvar felt his understanding of the situation shift dramatically. Supreme Commander, are you suggesting that the Empire should adopt human methods? I am suggesting that the Empire should learn from any methods that prove effective, Supreme Commander Thak Ven replied. Admiral, the High Command hereby modifies the terms of your challenge. Rather than determining a winner and loser, both species will work together to develop improved methods that combine Imperial efficiency with human sustainability. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward. Supreme Commander, humanity would be honored to share our knowledge with the Vecthari Empire. But we ask that this collaboration be voluntary for all participants. Agreed, Supreme Commander Thak Ven said immediately. The Empire has learned that forced cooperation is rarely as effective as willing partnership. Dr. Michelle Torres activated a new display showing combined human and Vecthari operations. Supreme Commander, we've already been experimenting with hybrid approaches on planet 3. Vecthari extraction. Precision combined with human ecological principles has produced remarkable results. The display showed mining operations that extracted needed materials while actually improving the surrounding environment. Vecthari technology could precisely remove specific minerals without damaging nearby ecosystems, while human techniques restored and enhanced those ecosystems during the extraction process. Engineer Rick Nelson was excited as he explained the hybrid results. Supreme Commander, we discovered that Vecthari precision technology can make our sustainable methods much more efficient. And our ecological approaches can make Vecthari extraction much less environmentally costly. Admiral Kethvar found himself genuinely intrigued by these hybrid approaches. Captain Morrison, your species has achieved something the Empire did not expect. You have shown us methods we had never considered. Admiral, Captain Jake Morrison replied, your species has shown us precision and efficiency that we could never achieve on our own. Maybe the real question isn't whether fighting is better than building, but what we can build together. Supreme Commander Thak Ven's image showed what might have been approval. Admiral Kethvar, you will remain in the Kepler 442 system to oversee joint development operations. Captain Morrison, humanity will assign permanent representatives to work with Imperial forces on developing these hybrid techniques. As the communication with Imperial High Command ended, Admiral Kethvar turned to look at the human delegation. A year ago, he had been preparing to destroy their entire species. Now he was preparing to learn from them, Captain Morrison, Admiral Kethvar said, "You posed a question when we first met. You asked why we should fight when we could build. I believe I am beginning to understand your meaning." "I'm still learning too, Admiral," Jake replied. "But I think the answer is that building together creates something neither of us could create alone." Dr. Michelle Torres was already working on plans for expanded collaboration. "Admiral, we have 17 different hybrid projects ready for testing. Each one combines Vectari precision with human sustainability. We could have prototype operations running within 6 months." Engineer Rick Nelson was equally enthusiastic. "And Admiral, your military logistics expertise could help us scale our sustainable methods to work across entire star systems instead of just single planets." Admiral Kethvar looked out at the 3 worlds of Kepler 442. Planet 1 was becoming a garden world that produced both resources and beauty. Planet 2 was becoming an oceanic paradise that generated energy, while supporting thriving marine ecosystems. Planet 3 was becoming a research center where multiple species worked together to understand the universe. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Kethvar said, "when this challenge began, I expected to demonstrate the superiority of conquest over cooperation. Instead, I have learned that cooperation and conquest are not opposites. They are different tools that can be used together to achieve greater success than either could achieve alone." "That's exactly right, Admiral," Jake said with a smile. "We didn't defeat the idea of taking what you need. We just learned that sometimes the best way to get what you need is to help others get what they need too." Captain Tony Martinez was already making plans for the expanded collaboration. "Admiral, humanity has colony ships ready to join your fleet in developing new star systems. We can show your people our building techniques while learning your precision metho.